before we start, Demko's starting tomorrow. So,
Actually?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm joking. Let's get it out of the way. All right. Sorry, Kate.
All right, so it's loose. The mood is loose. We can confirm.
Kate, you bit on it, Kate.
I did. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. Okay. Anyway, big opportunity with Game 7 tomorrow.
Elliotte, we've got a Game 7, but there's issues. Welcome to 32 Thoughts, a podcast presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation. Elliotte, let's get right to it. I think we were all hoping this thing went Game 7. It is going Game 7, but it's going Game 7 without Brock Boeser with a blood clotting issue. He will not play Monday night. The news is not good. Freege.
Very disappointed for him personally. That's the number one thing I think of. Boeser has had a fantastic season right from the first night against the Edmonton Oilers. His first 40-goal season in the NHL, 7 goals and 12 points in 12 playoff games. Just a fantastic year. And everybody knows the emotional challenges that Brock Boeser has been through over the last couple of years with his father's illness and passing. You know, some things in life, they're just not fair. And this is one of those things that isn't fair, that Boeser would suffer this kind of injury that would keep him and prevent him from playing on Monday night. Now, it's a blood clotting issue, and it was kind of a wild day, Jeff, just after when I was trying to get a handle on this story and what exactly was going on. Nobody really wanted to talk, but a couple people reached out privately saying, look, if this does get reported, people have to understand, because when they hear blood clotting issue, they think, oh boy, this is really serious. People had to understand that this is not serious. So it was important to some people that got put in there, which is obviously the most important thing, but just disappointed for Boeser in particular that he's not going to be able to play Game 7.
No, I'm with you. You feel awful for Brock Boeser. You feel awful for the Vancouver Canucks. You're right. He's been one of the comeback players of the year. It's been a wild ride with Brock Boeser and the Vancouver Canucks. He's found a real home there, finally. Productive, loved, appreciated, and man, he's a difference maker. This is going to be a tough one for Vancouver to pull off without the services of Brock Boeser. Hope he gets better soon. And that leads to the question then, Elliotte, do we have any kind of loose or accurate or any kind of timeline here?
No, we really don't. I remember covering the Maple Leafs in one of their playoff series. This was about 25 years ago when one of the toughest players I've ever come across, Jeff, Dmitry Yushkevich, came down with a blood clot, and he asked the team to play. And he was willing to sign a waiver. Yes, he did, Jeff. He did offer, saying, look, I'll sign a waiver that you're not responsible for anything if something happens to me. But the doctor at the time, Dr. Michael Clarefield, said, we're not doing that. Like, there's just no chance I'm going to even let you do that. You'll remember earlier this year, Frederik Andersen went on injured reserve on November 2nd because of a blood clotting issue, and he was activated on March the 7th. So that was 4 months. Again, I don't know this. Every case is different. So I don't have a good answer on what this means, but that's just kind of the idea we could be considering. Although again, every case is different. Now, Jeff, just moving on to the game itself and what this could mean, which of course is secondary. I wonder if they put Pettersson on JT Miller's wing, that he takes that spot.
Well, the one thing we've seen with Rick Tocchet so far is he's tried a lot of things to get Elias Pettersson going and put him in situations where he can be successful. I would not be surprised at all. I don't think you would either.
No, he will try anything, and we'll probably see a ton of mix and match combinations, but that's one of the looks I'm wondering if we see. Pettersson alongside Miller and maybe Suter.
Elliotte, we'll keep a close eye on that one. But before we get into Monday's action, your thoughts on Game 6, a game that was kind of a tilted rink. We saw the return of Stuart Skinner. Not necessarily sure we had a good read on whether he's back or not. Wasn't exactly tested. Shots on goal 27-15 in favor of Edmonton. But what did you make of the Oilers' 5-1 victory over Vancouver on Saturday?
Note to Canucks and Oilers fans, stop arguing about who has momentum in this series. There is no such thing, especially in this round, as momentum carrying over from game to game. How many times did Canucks fans think either they were dead or the Oilers were dead? How many times did Oilers fans think either they were dead or the Canucks were dead? And it never happened. What happened in Game 6 is completely irrelevant to Game 7. This will be a new game, completely different from the other 6, and we are going to see the best that these two teams have to offer. I find it impossible to predict. At the beginning of this series, I said this one will go 7. And for once, I was right about something. I still think Vancouver is the deeper team. And generally, the deeper teams win these series. But the one thing that really concerned me in game number 6, recognizing he has 48 hours to figure it out and get back to what he's done in the playoffs, Shilovs gave up a couple goals that had me say, is he getting a little tired here? The one off the glove, the one by Bouchard, he makes those saves in these playoffs normally. So to me, just like the Oilers had to refocus Skinner, the Canucks don't have the luxury of giving him 2 games off, but they do need to refocus him in the 48 hours. Because for the first time to me, it looked like he slipped a bit. That doesn't mean, however, it's fatal for Game 7. You?
Hey, I'm not so sure that I see fatigue. I kind of looked at that as if the entire team was flat and Shilovs was just one of the players that went along for the ride as well. Like, did you not get the feeling that at a certain point Vancouver was just saying to themselves, you know what, Game 7's in our barn, let's just get there. We'll take this.
In the third period, maybe. Yes. But not before the third period. Not before midway through. Because the thing is, Vancouver's pulled off big comebacks before. Remember Game 4 in Nashville, for example.
Of course.
Like when it's 3-1 in the third period, they're not punting. Maybe when it's 4 or 5-1, they're punting.
But did you ever get the sense that they were ready to mount one? Like even on their goal, like the Höglander goal, like that's great and great effort by Höglander, but like how do you let that guy stand there and have a couple of whacks at the puck? Like that was a complete breakdown by Edmonton. All I'm saying is that goal, and full credit to Höglander on that one, going to the net hard, banging in his own rebound. Like it's a goal that shouldn't go in. It just kind of like Elliotte, and it happens. It just looked to me like Vancouver was flat, and at no time did it seem like Vancouver was going to threaten in that game. Now, I agree with you. I think Vancouver's a deeper team here. Like, I am fascinated here at what's going to happen tonight when we see this thing. I can't wait for 9 o'clock Eastern between these two teams. What do we say at the beginning of the series? Please, I don't care who wins, but let's see 7 games of this. It's great on the ice. It's great off the ice as well. I just never got a sense that Vancouver was there to win that game, which is bizarre because I agreed with Bieksa on this one on Saturday. It's a house money game. Just go play. Just go play. You got Game 7 in your hip pocket in your own barn. All the pressure's on Edmonton. Just go play. All the pressure is off of you. I was stunned at how Vancouver came out and how I was stunned at how Vancouver played for 3 games. I agree with Bieksa.
The thing I would also say too is that if the Canucks do lose this series, I think they lost it in the first period of Game 6, if they lose it, because they didn't give Skinner more work. He looked nervous. He was a little floppy. Point. He lost the net a couple of times. And I have a few friends who are big Canucks fans, and they were all texting me, and they were saying, why aren't we pressuring this guy? Why aren't we pressuring this guy? He looks nervous. And he did look nervous. And the other thing, too, is then you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, when the pressure eventually comes, he's going to be rusty because he hasn't been allowed to get into a rhythm. I really thought the biggest play of the game for Skinner was he makes a blocker save off Quinn Hughes on a power play late in the second period. And that was the one, but that was the one that said to me, That's going to give Skinner some life. That's going to give him a good feeling. But now you've given him a win, and we'll see, does the confidence carry over for him? That's that. If I was Tocchet, that's where I would be all over the Canucks, is saying, why didn't you pressure this guy? Why did you let him ease his way back into the series? And you have to come out hard. Vancouver has dictated the early of a lot of these games. This was the one where I said, Edmonton, they weren't tilting the ice like they can with their offensive talent, but they didn't let Vancouver get to Skinner. And that, to me, was Edmonton's biggest victory in Game 6.
I think we all did the double take when we looked up halfway through the third period, and Vancouver had only registered 11 shots. Yeah. I'm staring at this, and am I seeing things here? 11 shots halfway through the third period. It was a bizarre one. So a couple of things I want to go over with you here. Evan Bouchard, his goal waved off. Goalie interference called right away.
A billion percent the right call. The clearest one of the playoffs to me. Of all the ones we've seen in the playoffs so far, that was the most obvious. And they nailed it. And Knobloch knew it.
Great non-challenge by the Edmonton Oilers. The other thing that I really
we should also say, because we have hammered the officials, and I really didn't like the call in Colorado Dallas the night before. That was one the officials called in real time and nailed it. You criticize when they deserve criticism, but you have to praise when they get it right. And that one in real time with bodies flailing away was the right call.
The other thing that I want to point out too, and there's a correlation here between soft calls and what I'm about to talk about here. And I really like the embellishment pack you guys did on Hockey Night on Saturday.
Well, that's Luke. He deserves credit for that.
Just detailing all the players that were going down soft. Because, and all I could think about is, if I'm an official, all I'm saying to myself is, and you know how officials feel about diving or embellishment, like, don't embarrass us. Don't embarrass us out there. And all I could think about is, not only don't embarrass us out there, but don't complain about soft calls if you're going to do that. If you want to create that type of confusion on the ice, if you want to put that in our head as we're watching the game, don't complain about soft calls. Because if you're going to do that, you're going to get soft calls. That is we always talk about the law of unintended consequences. No one's thinking this is going to lead to a flurry of soft call. Elliot, it will. If you treat the officials like that, get ready for a bunch of soft calls. So good on Gazdic for putting that one together. Full credit there to your entire crew, because it's the producers as well. But I thought that was a really important pack. And man, when you put them all together, it's kind of looking like soccer out there for each.
The thing that concerns me about it, Jeff, is it's getting worse this year. Like, it didn't start that bad in the playoffs, but it's getting worse and worse. I'm seeing more and more every game. I do believe, as I said on Saturday night, it gets worse every year, playoffs as opposed to the regular season. I just think, because I remember last year just texting people, like people who are out of the playoffs, like coaches and players, and saying, do you think the diving is really bad? And they're like, it's horrendous. This was last year. And I think I did a pack on it last year just talking about that. In the last podcast, you asked, what, or one of the Thought Lines questioners, I think, asked, how come they call both? And the legitimate answer is some of those are trips that are embellished, or some of those are holds that are embellished. But the honest thing is, and I was thinking about it after answering that question, and I was thinking about it looking at the pack Luke put together, and I said, if you're really serious about this, if you want to end this, say from now on, it's embellishment only.
Yep, removes the other call.
Remove the other call.
It automatically erases the other call. If you dive, it erases the initial infraction. I'm with you 100% if you want to get rid of it.
Am I correct in saying, like, I believe that even with two officials on the ice, the game is too fast to officiate properly. And that's my opinion. I know it's not a great answer because you want it to be. Even with two officials on the ice, it's too fast to officiate properly. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I know what you're trying to say. The word properly, I have a problem with. because this game is the hardest game to officiate in general. And I think that even approaching a standard of perfection is ridiculous. Like, again, like, it's funny. I went back this weekend. Here's how bored I was. I went back looking at old articles, whether it's online, a bunch of Sports Illustrated articles, or in this stack of hockey news magazines that I have here down in my basement where I record the podcast. And you know what the common theme has been in all these articles going back probably to when the NHL was started?
Yeah.
Officiating.
Well, but that's the case in every sport.
People complaining about officiating. But it's very specific in hockey. Like, it's always in crisis. It is always in crisis, Elliotte. Like, here's one. I'll pull this one up right now. Like, this is one that I pulled out. Dave Anderson in Sports Illustrated. What year is this one? This is from 1963. Headline, Officiating Mess in the National Hockey League.
I remember from Sports Illustrated in the 80s, hockey, call it socky. I remember that one when we were talking about all the fighting. That was a great one. What a great headline. I wish I would have written that.
Now, I know a lot of people might hear that and say, well, that means officiating's always been bad. I would always look at it as officiating's maybe the hardest thing you can do in hockey. Like, just by the very nature of the game, with people on the ice with the players making those calls, it's the hardest thing you can do. Now, I'm willing to have the conversation and listen to the idea of putting an official off the ice. It's going to be one of the thought line questions coming up here in a couple of moments. But calling the game properly, I've always kind of cringed at it a little bit, because what does
you have taken this, I'm stopping you. You have taken this like way off track, and you're wasting everybody's time. Yeah, it was a terrible mistake. That was a terrible mistake by me. I'm never asking your opinion again. So while all I'm saying is that even with two referees, the game is so fast, it's hard to do it properly.
Yes.
And the only way you stop the diving is if you just start calling the penalties for diving. You could,
with you.
And look, if it's really blatant, call them both. But if a guy puts a stick on someone and it's not really a trip and the guy goes down, just call the embellishment, and that will stop the problem right away. As they say in French, immédiatement.
Well done, Monsieur Bilang. Ça c'est bien ça. Here's my theory on why we're seeing more and more of it.
Okay.
My theory is there are more and more teams and more coaches in the NHL who are willing to say this: 5-on-5, I'm happy to play 50-50 puck and take my chances on the power play and do whatever it takes to get to the power play. 5-on-5, I'm happy to play 50-50. I just want power plays. That's where we're going to win hockey games. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I think you're probably right. I'll just say this. I know there are some coaches out there who really hate diving. I would like to think that most people in hockey hate diving. And if there are people out there saying dive to get the penalty, then I think even more referees just have to start making that one dive call and say, if you don't like it, tell your guys to stop. All it's going to take, Jeff, is one or two teams getting scored on in, say, a Game 7 or the Western Conference Final.
Oh, man.
Because they get a diving penalty and it's all going to be over. This is a correctable problem.
There is one coach who is still involved.
And I don't think they should do that. I don't think they should do that in Game 7, Vancouver, Edmonton tonight, because you haven't been doing it the whole series. Do it in Game 1 of the conference finals.
When you mentioned there are a lot of coaches that really hate diving, I've seen firsthand from one coach who's still in the playoffs how much he hates diving. When I was working with the Toronto Marlies of the American Hockey League, I remember having various conversations with Paul Maurice, who was the head coach at the time, about a number of different things. And one of them was diving, and it's something he's very passionate about. And whenever you hear a coach say that, you say, oh, okay, well, I get it, but if it means you're going to be put on the power play, I'm sure you're pretty happy about it. I remember watching Paul Maurice tear a strip off of one of his players. Like now, everyone's seen Paul Maurice mad by now, everybody.
Yeah.
I remember him having a go at one of his own players for diving. Like
Kevin Dineen was another
nasty.
guy.
He really
He did
hated
not
it.
like diving.
That surprised
He
me.
told his players no diving. He was a guy who really couldn't stand it.
All right. What are you looking for in Game 7 here? Like, this one's juicy. All Canadian matchup. Not exactly any love lost between the teams or the fan bases. What are we expecting tonight, Elliotte?
Well, the thing I've really enjoyed the most is that these coaches, and Rick Tocchet, you know he's got big brass ones, right? Big ones. He's not afraid to do things. He threatened his players with Lekkerimäki. The one thing I really liked about Tocchet was he said, I'm not going to do it when it came to breaking up his lines, but he changed his mind when he realized it would help Pettersson. To me, that's what coaching is all about. It's taking your biases and challenging them and doing what's best for the team. The thing I think that's been really interesting is the way that Knobloch has shown that despite his, what I would say, placid demeanor, he has brass ones too. Taking out Skinner, putting Pickard back in, then going back to Skinner when I'm not sure every coach would have done that, and also taking Corey Perry out. That, you can argue that Perry hasn't played well, and I agree with that. I think it's true. But I don't know how many coaches would have done that. So I look at that as, Knobloch is not afraid. So one of the things I'm looking at for Game 7 is, what is the big brass ones move that one of these coaches is going to make? Tocchet already threw cold water on Demko, so we're not expecting him. And we'll talk a little bit more about Demko in a minute. But I wonder if Knobloch's going to put Perry back in. Maybe he takes Connor Brown out. Maybe he takes someone else out. But I wonder if Knobloch says, and he's not a guy who likes to change a winning lineup, but, Perry's experience, do you want that there in a Game 7? There's a lot of, I just can't imagine one of these coaches isn't going to do something that says, boy, that's a gutsy call. And Jeff, I'm expecting a great game. There are a lot of people on these two teams that compete really hard. And I just don't see one of those teams going down without a huge fight. A coach said to me, he says he thinks what's going to happen is one team's going to get out to a lead, and we might see the dam break. And he says it could be a 6-1 game. Now, this is a coach, so he knows a lot more than I do. I said, no way. I said, I think we could see overtime in this one. To me, this has got Game 7 overtime written all over it. But again, I think a huge key in this game is the Canucks have to get on Skinner fast. They have to force Skinner to make big saves early. That's their key. Because if he builds up his confidence again, that's big trouble.
You mentioned Demko. Have a thought there?
Yeah, so Tocchet came out, as we mentioned, he said he's not going to play. I'm not there, so I'm only hearing things, from a few provinces away. I'm really having a hard time getting a handle on where he really is here. Like, I just remember from the beginning, I was told it's a unique injury. You can't have surgery. So all you can do is you can rest it and then start to have him take shots, get a handle on things, and then see when he's ready. And people keep on talking about setbacks and things like that. I don't know that any of that is true. I just think that because this injury, whatever it is, they were so uncertain about it and what it meant, I still think a month later, they're trying to get a handle on exactly what the timeline is. Now, one of the biggest debates I have heard is, does it matter if he hasn't taken shots in a full practice? Because he's taken some shots from guys who aren't playing, and some of those guys are NHL players, and some of those guys are pros. And I've had people say to me, that's enough. And I've had other people say to me, no, that's not enough. You have to take like a real practice with your top players shooting at you. And I think that's one of the sources of disagreement here. Does that really matter? And so, again, I find the whole thing very difficult to pin down, because I still don't think everybody here 100% knows what the actual timeline is going to be. I think there's a hope that he's getting closer and could play, but I think there's also a recognition that everybody here doesn't want the same thing to happen, which is what Demko comes in and he gets hurt right away again.
One more thing, and this is just as a quick aside as you transition. Got some news coming up here in a couple of seconds. One of the common refrains around the league is, oh, this is a league where they just recycle coaches. Oh, these are all a bunch of retreads.
We've talked about this.
Guys just shuffling about teams. If the Vancouver Canucks win, who are your 4 coaches, Elliotte?
Well, they're all coaches that have had multiple jobs. DeBoer, this is his 5th team. Maurice has coached how many teams?
Carolina, Toronto,
twice.
Winnipeg, Florida.
Carolina twice. Okay.
Yep.
So if you include that twice, that's 5 teams. So Laviolette's coached 6 teams, right, Jeff?
Yes, starting with the Islanders.
And Tocchet will be at 3 if he gets in. Knobloch is a first-time coach. Believe me,
Yep.
all of those coaches waiting for their big break, they are rooting for Chris Knobloch to win on Monday night. They need somebody to point to. But, and the other thing too about Tocchet is, Tocchet was really picky about his 3rd job. Remember, he was in Tampa when the Tampa situation was nowhere near as solid as it is right now. And he was in Arizona when that situation wasn't very solid, obviously. So Tocchet had a chance to go to Dallas. He turned it down because he didn't like the term. He had a chance to go to Winnipeg before they hired Rick Bowness, and he turned it down. And ultimately, he chose to go to Vancouver when he got a contract that he was happy with. And also, he believed that Jim Rutherford would create a situation that he could be successful in. And Tocchet, who was very comfortably in the TV studios, he was able to pick his place based on he thought it would be the best thing at the time to be set up to win, because he knew he might only get one more chance. And we've talked about this, and I agree with you. Too often people say retread. It's just, you know what? It's just social media clout. That's what people do it for. It doesn't, like, there are some coaches who get 3 or 4 chances that aren't good coaches or can't do the job. That is true. But there are lots of other coaches who learn about, hey, this is why it worked. This is why it didn't work. This is where you can succeed. This is where you can't succeed. And I think the other thing that a lot of coaches will admit to you, maybe later, but not right away, is I think there are coaches in this league who take jobs where they know they can't win. And they get told, you can't win there because it's not set up to win. And they still do it because there's only 32 of these jobs. And I understand that. If your whole life you've wanted to be a coach and one comes open, it's really tough to say no when it's your first time. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Okay, with that, let's dovetail into the news and talk more about coaches. And the big story around coaches this past weekend, Elliotte, Rod Brind'Amour and his staff have been re-upped by the Carolina Hurricanes. Not exactly a surprise. We all thought it was trending this direction. You've been consistent from day one on this one. Your thoughts on Brind'Amour and his staff returning?
took longer than it should have. And it depends on who you speak to. I think some of the Brind'Amour loyalists were very frustrated, and I think that's why some of the reports got out. But I think some people in Carolina always believed it would happen, and they just felt it was the way negotiations go sometimes. That, one side proposes this, one side proposes that, and, you have to get it to the finish line. Obviously, the key there is that the assistant coaches got some security. That was very important to Brind'Amour. I heard the assistant coaches got 2 years plus 1, which I assume is a team option. But, that's what I heard. That's not bad. A lot of assistant coaches would definitely take that. Brind'Amour, 5 years. I'm curious to see if this is the last contract that Brind'Amour ever signs. He will be 54 in August. And I had heard that retirement, when it was something that I don't know if it was in his immediate future, but it was something that he was thinking about at some point. But, 5 years is a good contract. A lot of coaches don't get that, so that's a really good deal for him. It's good for the Hurricanes because, as we've talked about, he is incredibly important to their culture and success. And, there's always this big debate about what Brind'Amour gets paid. And the last time he took a lot of heat from other coaches who felt, I believe it was 1.8 was too low for what he deserved. Well, nobody as of Sunday afternoon would tell me the exact number of what he is at. The gossip in coaching circles is that he is doing extremely well for a coach who has been successful but hasn't actually won the Stanley Cup. That he's not at a lot of those coaches' level, but he's just below that, which I think would be fair and would make the coaches who were upset last time much happier.
Should actually compensate coaches that haven't won the Stanley Cup more, considering coaches that have won the Stanley Cup with multiple teams is only, checks notes, 3. Elliotte. There's a better chance.
Jeff, why do you hate capitalism?
Of a first timer. All I'm saying here, Elliotte, is there's a better chance to be a newbie Stanley Cup winning coach than someone who's done it before. That's
that's good. You should put that into the coaches association mission statement. If you've won a Stanley Cup, you can't make any more money because odds are you aren't going to do it again. I think that'll go over huge.
I'm just looking at the numbers, Elliotte. It's all, the numbers don't lie. I'm just looking at the numbers. That's all I'm doing. I'm just running the analytics, as we like to say, Elliotte. Speaking of coaches, so USA Hockey choosing Mike Sullivan, head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, to be the bench boss for the Four Nations and the Olympics as well. To which we wonder, what about Canada here?
So the word at the time was that Canada was going to potentially do 2 coaches, one for the Four Nations freeze or whatever it's called next year.
Face off.
Okay, no, I like it better. No, I'm going with Four Nations freeze. I like it better.
Okay,
I've renamed this tournament the Four Nations freeze.
The Four Nations
and the
freeze,
Olympics that there would be 2. That there could be 2 different coaches for it. And the 2 names I was hearing a lot were Brind'Amour and John Cooper. Now, John Cooper is overseas. He's at the World Championship. So it's got some people wondering if there's some conversation about him being one of those coaches, which obviously, being a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, he would deserve it. So I think he's very much in the mix. Brind'Amour was the other name I'd heard.
Again, sticking with coaches, vacancies in Winnipeg, San Jose, New Jersey, Seattle, and Los Angeles. Has a decision been made on Jim Hiller yet?
Not officially, but just in asking around on Sunday after a lot of the Brind'Amour stuff was done, there's definitely a sense, at least to me, that the coaches are conceding that Jim Hiller is likely to be the next head coach of the LA Kings, no longer on an interim basis, that he's going to get the head job. The Kings have made it very clear during this process that they like they like the job that Hiller did, and they like the way he thinks. And, like I said, nothing is done until it's done. I've used that line a lot this week, but there is definitely a feeling among coaches that Hiller is the big favorite, if not overwhelming favorite, to get that job. Winnipeg, while they continue to interview some outside candidates, I think a lot of people seem to feel, although it's not the same feeling I'm getting as with Hiller in LA, that Scott Arniel is definitely the clubhouse favorite in Winnipeg, but I'm not comfortable proclaiming anything done as we record this. San Jose, they continue to interview people. We mentioned Jeff Blashill last week. You mentioned Marco Sturm, and I agree that that's a name that I think could potentially be floated there. Ryan Warsofsky. There's this weird situation going on in Abbotsford of the American Hockey League with Jeremy Culleton, where Rick Dollywall reported last week that Culleton wouldn't be back potentially, and there seems to be something there, although the Canucks have since made it clear that he's been offered a contract. I have wondered if potentially Culleton's been interviewed in San Jose too. It's something that is that a couple of people have mentioned. They wonder if Culleton's got some NHL opportunities that he's exploring. So that's another one I've been kind of wondering about. We'll see. Seattle, I stick with the same three names that I mentioned last week: Baalsma, McClellan, and Jay Leach, and we'll see what happens there. And New Jersey, again, I think we've mentioned a lot of the key names. And again, I still think that Sheldon Keefe was one guy they were still waiting for some kind of clarity on as we record this on Sunday. But that's, to me, all of a sudden, the one that it appeared on the weekend had a bit more clarity seemed to be Hiller in LA.
Interesting. Quick American Hockey League coaching note. Anything with Wilkes-Barre Scranton? JD Forrest not renewed.
Yeah, the name that I'm starting to hear there is John Snowden, who's an assistant coach in Lehigh Valley. And it makes sense because, Jeff, what organization did he work in before joining the Flyers American Hockey League team?
Toronto with Dubas.
Jeff, I have often told people that you are a genius, and once again, you proved it to be true.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So brilliant.
He worked in the Toronto organization. He won a Kelly Cup with Newfoundland in 2019 and spent the previous 2 years before last season in LV as an assistant with the Marlies. So there is a connection with the Penguins GM. Snowden's a relatively young guy. He's 42.
The one name that I've wondered about here with that job, now technically he's still employed by Belleville, but and I'm not sure how deep Steve Staios is going to change the coaching staffs of teams like the Belleville Senators, with all kinds of rumors about Jay McKee. But I wonder about Dave Bell, who took over from Troy Mann, who was fired this past season. And I got to be honest with you, Dave Bell did a really good job with that Belleville Senators team. As much as they may have been, financially challenged at times, this isn't a resource-rich organization, although I have a feeling that is changing. I thought Bell did a wonderful job, and if someone like Jay McKee does end up getting that American Hockey League job and Dave Bell finds himself on the outside, I wonder/hope if there's another, at least American Hockey League position out there for him somewhere. Because again, he did a great job with the Belleville Senators this year. What do you make of the Matvei Michkov rumors on the weekend? Philadelphia Flyers first-round draft pick.
That's a great question. It has been a wild few months around the Philadelphia Flyers when it comes to their Russian players. First of all, the Fedotov situation coming to a happy end for the player, coming over to North America. Then Kolosov coming over, and now reports that he's leaving, followed by reports now that Michkov is coming. And all I can tell you is I was trying to sort through this, preparing for the pod. I said to someone, this is like a John le Carre novel. And they said to me, imagine being in the middle of it. Because it's one of those things where the one thing I can guarantee you is the league and the Flyers, they definitely believe that the easiest way to get these things done is let them happen quietly. The more noise there is around them, the harder it is to get things done, because then the external pressure comes in. And it's hard enough with some of these prospects when it's just you and the team or you and the player. When other people get involved, it really becomes complicated. The one thing I can say here is it seems pretty clear that Mishkov wants to come over. And the news here seems to indicate to me that there is a path for him to come over. And initially when this broke about a month ago, somebody said to me, everybody believes he will come, but it won't be for next season. It's probably more likely for 25, 26. And then I checked with a couple of people on Sunday and they said, now we're really not sure. And what that says to me is they're following that rule is less is more. The less is public, the more chance they think it has to happen. But these are always very delicate negotiations because money has to be involved. There's rules about who you can pay and who you can't pay. Like technically it might have to be the player through his contract that has to pay to buy out his contract, to buy out his Russian contract or his KHL contract. Like these are not easy things that happen. And what I'm taking all these reports to mean is there is a path for this to occur. But just because there is a path doesn't mean it's going to happen. And the worst thing that can happen is it becomes so very public. Like, honestly, I deal with people who do not like it when these kinds of negotiations get out there because they say it complicates everything and makes it more difficult. And they have to answer questions, but they really don't like to give information.
This is one of the biggest we'll see what happens. Because if Michkov comes over now, Elliotte, what types of changes do the Flyers make in the offseason? This one is one of the juiciest ones to follow. We'll see where it goes. Elliotte, and finally to conclude, the biggest one, I suppose, Toronto Maple Leafs, Craig Berube, Stanley Cup champion, 2019, former Toronto Maple Leaf himself, part of the infamous Doug Gilmour trade that saw the Maple Leafs reach some heights back in the early to mid-90s. Craig Berube, the new coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Your thoughts?
I don't think anyone is surprised by the Berube hiring unless John Cooper or Rod Brind'Amour somehow dropped on their lap, which we didn't think was going to happen. He was the favorite for the job, Jeff. I think I'm not thrilled with some of the narrative about all this about Sheldon Keefe. Like, I don't think Sheldon Keefe was a soft touch. Sheldon Keefe got fired because they said they can run it back. They were simply in a position where they couldn't do the same things over and over again. But it didn't mean that Keefe was soft. Particularly with Nylander, I heard he could be really tough, really tough. I think when I go back to the 2019 Stanley Cup final, and I went through some of my notes, just asking some St. Louis players about Berube, is that he talked to people in a way that some people had never been talked to before. And what they said was there were some players in particular, and I don't know if they were treated with the soft touch or they were given their space to do what they wanted or they'd never really been disciplined in any way before. But Berube got there and those players heard things told to them in a way that hadn't happened before, and it resonated with the group. And obviously there was a short-term jolt and they won the cup with Binnington getting really hot. That's what I think is going to happen here. Now, the Leafs, the reason the Berube stuff gained so much steam so quickly is that they were calling everybody about him. It was impossible to keep this secret. Like, one of the things I heard they did was they called the NHLPA and said, hey, if we hire Craig Berube, are there any problems here that we're going to have to know about? And they were given, and they were told, no, there's nothing here. But that's what this is going to be about. And, I think there were times that Keefe was very tough on the players, and everybody remembers one particular case where they kind of had to walk it back. Like, that's not going to happen here. Berube is going to say what he says, and he does it in a way that is effective. But the other thing about Berube that's really important is if you buy into him, he buys into you. And he'll put you out there. He'll put you in places to succeed. He's gruff, but he's not unfair. And I think that's going to be very important for them. We also know they talked to Todd McClellan. We reported last week they talked to Gerard Gallant. Who I wonder if they asked about? I don't know it ever got to interview stage, but I wonder if they asked about.
Who's that?
Dale Hunter.
Okay. That is a really interesting name.
Because I think he's a great coach, but he would want no part of this. And specifically, I'm talking about you, Marek. Like, he would want no part of you.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I do understand that. I think the temptation of coaching Mitch Marner once again is a tempting one for Dale Hunter. But the thing that I've always been under the impression that unless it's his brother running an NHL team, I don't know that Dale Hunter would want to go. And I've always been of the belief, and no one has told me otherwise, that Dale Hunter has always wanted to break Brian Kilrea's record for most coaching wins in the OHL. Right now, he's number 2. And listen, he's got a great setup in London. Not only
I get all this.
The owners of the team and can set records, and he's got a comfortable lifestyle. Like his life's in a spot where he's really, really comfortable. So I don't know, and I don't know whether Dale Hunter would be interested.
Like, he's 250 wins away from Kilrea. So he's got work to do.
250, yeah. He does, but London's always a competitive
Doesn't mean he can't do it.
It's not like he's going to get fired. I mean, who's going to fire Dale Hunter? His brother? Not Rob Simpson? Like, no, it's not going to happen. So I think it would have to be the absolute perfect scenario, and one that would probably see his brother Mark running the team that he's with. I also
think, I was around him that year that he coached Washington as an interim for the rest of that season. And like, I agree with you. I think he is a hell of a coach. Like, I think
no doubt about
coach. But I just can't see him putting up with all of us in Toronto on a daily basis. Yeah, I don't think he would have any desire to do that.
Didn't he only bring one tie to Washington?
So, back. I can't remember, but it sounds right. I'm going on the road for the Western Conference final. I've got 19 ties with me.
Not Dale. I'm going to go coach the Washington Capitals. I am bringing one tie, and it's going to be green because I love my London Knights. I love it. All right, straight ahead here on the podcast, we'll do a full autopsy and a what's next for both the Boston Bruins and the Colorado Avalanche. In the meantime, quick pause. When we come back, the Montana's Thought Line. Don't go anywhere. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to the podcast. Time now for the Montana's Thought Line. Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue.
Try the ribs. Try the ribs. You got to try the ribs.
Thank you to Rick Turner. The way to get in, 32 Thoughts at sportsnet.ca, 1-833-311-3232. These emails and voicemails curated lovingly by Griffin Porter. We'll start with John Costello from Wichita, Kansas. Hey guys, listening to the pod today, you were asking about what happens on guaranteed win night if the team loses. In the late 1990s, I was the director of group sales for the Wichita Thunder in the old CHL. We had the contingency of bringing a game ticket to the office for another game. Hope that helps. And further to that one, because this was part of the conversation that we had with about Jim Nargang, who emailed in the program, former Detroit Red Wing, Michigan State as well. And, so a wonderful conversation about him. I also got a note from Pete Weber, who called games for Notre Dame years ago and would have called games that Jim was involved in when he played at Michigan State. And we wondered about this game, March 31st, 1977. Detroit Red Wings, Minnesota North Stars was guaranteed win night. And they lost to the North Stars 3-1. So I had wondered about what happens on guaranteed win night if you lose, and couldn't find the answer anywhere online or elsewhere. And whoever runs the OHL history account chimed in and found an article written by Tom Henderson from the Detroit Free Press going back to 1977, who points out that whoever went to that game, saw the loss, would get a game ticket for the next game, which was against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Tom Henderson, in the piece in the Detroit Free Press, writes this: guarantee, big deal. So you see 2 losses for the price of 1. That's like being promised a broken toaster if the first one you buy doesn't work. Tom Henderson from the Detroit Free Press. In hey man, Detroit was a tough team back then. Like, wins were at a premium. You can understand how everyone was a little bit PO'd. So thanks to OHL History for doing the legwork on that one and finding that piece in the Detroit Free Press. And John Costello,
really appreciate it.
Director of Group Sales. We're
lucky.
Wichita
We've got
Thunder.
great listeners. We're very lucky.
And some of them are from Australia. Neil from Sydney. Hey guys, I've been a Canucks homer since growing up across the road from the Canucks coach and general manager and subsequent broadcast legend, Harry Neal. Wow. Can you imagine being Harry Neal's neighbor? That would be awesome. I would look for every excuse whenever I would see Harry to go up and just go and talk hockey and just listen to him and laugh and laugh. And one of the funniest people in the history of the game. Okay. I would like to suggest a resolution to the Situation Room controversy of recent days, drawing upon the current practice of the National Rugby League in Australia. Listen to this one, Freach. In the event of video review, the crowd at the stadium and on television gets to see and hear the analysis in real time by the NRL bunker, aka Situation Room, and their discussions with the referee. It makes for excellent viewing, keeps the crowd engaged, and gives the commentators even more to chew on. Sometimes you even get to see the referee and bunker debate the rules to a level of detail that even Jeff would find impressive. I think that's a compliment. No system is perfect, but it's an improvement upon the present. Oh, you love this, Elliotte. Love the podcast despite its clear anti-Canucks bias. Hang on. Here's the sign off. You ready for this one? The great sign off. Try the kangaroo. There you go. Neil from Sydney, Australia.
We need a song. Try the kangaroo. Try the kangaroo.
Try the roo. Let's go. Come on, Rick Turner. Your thoughts on that one? So everybody at the event, like at the rink, and the TV audience at home can follow along with the conversation between the war room and the officials.
This has been suggested to us before. It's not the first time, and I agree with it. I think it would be fantastic. I think it could be a great source of revenue. You could sponsor it. You could pay-per-view it. You know what, Jeff? I am more convinced than ever that we will get to this day eventually. I don't know how soon it will be, but I do think the day will come that this happens, because I think it's too good not to. And can we talk about Bissonnette a little bit? Like, there were some people who were really angry about what Biz said on the weekend about the official having the FanDuel account. Number one, I think everybody needs to calm down here a little bit and calm down here a lot.
It's a joke.
It's a joke.
It's a joke.
We all know who Biz is. We know he's joking. Like, people need to relax. Like, he's kidding. Okay, that's who he is. But the second thing, and I won't back down on this one. I got challenged on it last week. Look, I find to broadcasters that the Situation Room is very helpful. After a ruling, I will call them and they will tell me exactly what they decided. Exactly what they decide, whether I agree with it or disagree with it. They're very helpful. They explain it to me. If I ask them for a picture for the puck in the net, they'll give it to me. But I just think everybody's going to be better off if the transparency is even more full. If a referee can answer a question from a pool reporter after a game, or if this thing happened. And I just think everybody would be better off if we heard this stuff. And I think eventually it will get there. And you know why, Jeff? Because you're going to be able to sell it. And that will ultimately, I wonder what would happen if the NHL went out tomorrow and said, okay, to all the sponsors, we'll sell these conversations with your name on them, or a pay-per-view with your name on it. Do you not think somebody would come running to pay for that?
I would assume so. It would be one of the most compelling parts of the show. And it would remove all of the guesswork that everybody does. Now, again, I'll always
and at the end of the day, it will be a win for the league and the officials. It will be.
There's a couple of
At the beginning, they won't like it, but at the end, it'll be a win.
It'll be uncomfortable at first, and eventually it'll be like, wow, how come we haven't been doing this all along? Everybody seems to love this.
Why were we doing this 50 years ago? Well, because we didn't have the technology 50 years ago. Well, we should have been.
We should have been ahead of our time. A couple of things here. We used to do this with the CHL package on Sportsnet, as I've pointed out before. It didn't last very long, but it was very compelling. It was really interesting to hear the conversation, the dynamic. And I think it would be even more so in the NHL, where the stakes are, with all due respect, higher. And more people are watching / listening. And then again, debating and discussing only creates more interest in your property. The other thing that I keep coming back to, you know who's asked all the time to give access? Players. Players are always being told to open themselves up, allow the cameras here, allow the cameras there. It's growing the game, it's growing the league. You need to, it's all, players need to do this. Players need to do this. All about the players that need to do the heavy lift here. I would turn around to the league if I'm the Players Association and say, you know what we think you should do? We think you guys should allow cameras everywhere too, starting with these conversations so everybody can understand them. Why is it only the players that have to shoulder the responsibility of being followed around everywhere with cameras and microphones? Why not this situation? If it's good for the players because it grows the game, why not the league as well? Why is it only the players that have to shoulder this one? That's where I come down on this one. And again, you're right. At first, a lot of people in the NHL that will hate it. This is too much. This is offside. Fans don't need to see this. This is wrong. But eventually, I would hope that they would realize and understand quickly that this is only good. Again, what do we always talk about? The more information you have around your game, player, event, team, the stickier your product becomes. And the longer you lengthen someone's attention span as a fan, it is all good. Thank you to our kangaroo-eating Canucks fan in Sydney, Australia, former neighbor of the great Harry Neal. Let's get to a voicemail. Let's go to Nova Scotia.
Yeah, hi guys. Kyle from Nova Scotia calling. Big fan of the show. I had a question for you about refereeing. Given that it is difficult for the refs to keep up with the action, has there ever been, or what do you guys think about having referees actually just sitting and having a look from both sides of the ice? If the ice isn't that big, you could have a good, clear view if there was a good seat on both ends of the rink and kind of see all the action at once without having to be skating around all the time. Anyway, I thought that might be something that you could do in hockey, given the size of the ice surface, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Elliotte?
I've kind of wondered if that might happen at some point. In the last segment, we had a lengthy discussion about officiating. I don't know if we need to go into it again. But I mean, ultimately, you're going to need officials on the ice on some level to break up skirmishes and things like that. But the ice rinks aren't going to get any bigger, the surfaces. And I have wondered if they would take one off just to make it less cluttered. Again, that's a thing that maybe somewhere down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. But I don't know that it's on the front burner at this time.
No. I think I've always looked at that idea as being something in addition to the 2 referees and the 2 linesmen on the ice at the same time. This would be a 5th official who sits like a, tennis ump somewhere in the stands or in some other privileged position and that person would have the ability to call fouls. I don't necessarily know, because I can hear the official association pushing back. Whoa. Hold on here. Let's not take any officials off the ice. But I do wonder if that could be, you can make that case for a 5th. Well, I'm pretty sure we'll have that discussion at some point, because you can probably make the argument as well, Elliotte. Maybe the toughest place to make a call is on the ice. When you look at all the bodies and how fast everything moves, I don't know if you've ever tried officiating before, but it's not easy. I've tried it.
No, I would never argue.
It's hard.
I would never argue it is easy.
It's hard. Okay, we'll finish up with this one. Steve in St. Louis, Elliotte. Gentlemen, big fan here from St. Louis. My question is about waiving of no trade clauses. Does the player have the right to know what the deal entails, or only the team they're being asked to waive for? For example, when the Blues tried to ship Torrey Krug to Philadelphia last summer, would the Blues be required to notify Krug of all the assets involved? I ask because my thought was, quote, what if Krug was considering the move to play with Kevin Hayes, only later to find out Hayes was part of the package in return? I'm assuming there's no recourse once the deal goes through. Thanks for the time, boys. Let's go Blues and try the ribs, from Steve in St. Louis.
That's an excellent question, actually. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule there, but I could see a player saying, who are you trading me for? Or a team saying, look, we have the ability to get this player and we have to include you. And that's why you're here. If you're trying to sell a player on getting a deal done, I you know what? Again, no rule, but I could see it coming up.
I could see it as well. Most notably,
hey, we need you to waive your no trade clause because we're about to trade for Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews.
Yeah. So you don't get to play with Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews. You're going to the other team who's rebuilding. Enjoy the new zip code.
I could also see some GMs being out there. If you don't take this trade, I'm going to leak it to a reporter that you blocked us from getting Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid. Enjoy playing in this town after that one.
Yeah, good luck showing your face at restaurants downtown. The Montana's Thought Line, Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue. We discuss Boston, Colorado. What's next?
Jeff, Ellie, and Tom on 32 Thoughts. Try the ribs today. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Elliotte, time to talk about a couple of different teams here. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It is 32 Thoughts, the podcast, presented as always by our friends at the GMC Sierra Elevation. Boston Bruins, what's next? Colorado Avalanche, what's next? We'll talk about the team from the Atlantic Division first. Questions here. What does Don Sweeney do now? He'll have $20 million in cap space to play with. There is a Jeremy Swayman contract out there somewhere. There is potentially a Linus Ullmark trade out there. There is the ability to re-sign Brad Marchand out there on July 1st, and a whole bunch of questions about your DeBrusques and your Grizzlies. What happens in Boston, Elliotte?
Well, Swayman extension now all of a sudden becomes the number one thing after the way he played in the playoffs. Given the opportunity to become the number one goalie, he took it and ran with it. Took them within 2 wins of the Eastern Conference Final. And a year where Boston wasn't expected to be that good. I don't think that can be underestimated. A lot of us counted out Boston this year. A lot of people didn't think they would be able to make the playoffs, never mind win a round and come close to winning a second one. They really overachieved this season based on the way I think a lot of us looked at them. So Swayman is obviously going to be the big question here. He's going to have arb rights, and it's going to be a big case. And,
Yep.
he's going to look to get paid as a guy who's approaching the age of 26 next November. He's going to be looking to cash in at the same range. I don't know whether it'd be the same contract, but he's going to want to be around the Hellebucks of the world. And he's going to say that I proved I'm a number one guy. So we'll see where that goes. But look, they tried to start that one already and they couldn't get it done. So they've been trying on this one for months, but there's no question now the price has gone up. So the next question becomes Ullmark. Is he back next year? Do they try to move him to a team that he will agree to go to? Ullmark, once again, really declined to talk about it on Getaway Day on Sunday. He continues to make his point that he makes that list for a reason, and it's a personal reason, and that's it. And I think that's fair. But I have no doubt that some of the teams that can get him will continue to look and see about possibility. And the other thing that happens here is, and I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm going to bring it up. When does Ullmark get to change his list? Now, some lists change on June 30th or July 1st, corresponding with the end of the NHL calendar year. However, not every contract is like that. Some are submitted upon team's request. Some are other dates. So I think one of the other questions is going to be here, when does Ullmark have to submit his list? And the thing is, the list doesn't have to say the same every year. Is Ullmark going to look at it and he's going to say, look, maybe I've changed how I felt about some of these situations year to year, or maybe I know that there might be some teams interested in me that I'm not sure I want to go to, so maybe he'll put them on his list. So all of these things are going to be a factor here. Other than that, I think the number one thing that the Bruins are going to continue to look at, and it will probably affect a lot of their decision making, is down the middle. Charlie Coyle did a really good job this year. Pavel Zacha did a really nice job and is signed for 3 more years. But I can see them, it was still so hard for them to score in the playoffs. Like the available centers, like they were in on Lindholm before Lindholm was traded from Calgary to Vancouver, but they were not going to be able to match the volume of what the Flames got. And so they were out. But there are teams who believe that they have been interested in Lindholm for a long time. And, Lindholm is not a guy in these playoffs who has hurt his value either after a really hard regular season. So I think they'll be in on that. I think they'll be looking at centers. And the other one I think you're looking at here is there's a couple of players that they're going to have to sign who have contracts for next year. One is Trent Frederick, who is quietly a very important piece of their team. And the other is their captain. And, their captain, Marchand, he just turned 36. So, and he's a Bruin, he wants to be a Bruin, but it's going to be an interesting negotiation just to see what everybody decides here. And that brings us to Jake DeBrusk. Go ahead, bud.
Can I pause on Marchand for 1 second
Yes.
here quickly?
Yeah.
Given his age and given everybody knows where he wants to be and how much the organization still values him and wants him and the fans love him, can you not just see Brad Marchand going on evergreen deals? Just 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year. Could you not see that with Brad Marchand? I mean, everybody knows
I think
where he wants to be.
I think that's one of those things where I don't know. I've never asked him and I don't want to speak for him. My history with that is sometimes the player says yes, then the agent says, hold on a second here.
Yeah.
But
I know.
I just don't know. It's a great question. I just don't know the answer. I really don't.
Okay.
The one thing about Jake DeBrusk is I'm really not comfortable speculating on him because I don't want anyone to think that his dad, Louis, who we work with, is speaking out of school. I'm really not comfortable with the whole situation. clearly this guy wants to be a Bruin. He was hurt for a good chunk of this year. He loves being a Bruin. One of the things I have heard, Jeff, independently of the DeBrusk family, is that there are teams looking for scoring who are going to be interested. I know some other teams have speculated that Seattle would be the kind of team that would be interested in DeBrusk. So I think, he said before he wants to be a Bruin. He hasn't always liked how long it's taken to get his contract situations done. So, and it seemed to me the way he was talking on Sunday, he was frustrated about that again. I don't know where this is going to go, but I do believe that there are teams looking for scoring who are going to be interested in him.
Always an interesting time. And as we mentioned, Don Sweeney has $20 million worth of cap space to play with in the offseason. The Colorado Avalanche, Elliotte, and this is a huge what's next here. And this one's complicated because if you're Chris McFarland here, you have to park, about $13 million worth of cap space because at a certain point, Valeri Nichushkin is coming back, and you wonder about Gabriel Landeskog as well, which complicates a lot of the things you might want to do in the offseason. And we'll think of Jonathan Drouin, and we'll think of Sean Walker, and Casey Middlestat is ARB eligible. Man, this one's going to be a tough offseason. How do you see it playing out for Colorado?
I think it's going to be a challenge for them. Now, the number one thing I will say about the Avalanche is I think they're a really smart organization. They have good players there that people want to play with. And I think players like playing in Denver. So there will be an attraction to them because of that. And to me, that's almost half the battle. You will find good players who will want to go there. There's one guy you didn't even name, and I think it's the biggest one, and that is Rantanen. Rantanen is one more year,
July 1.
and he's a UFA. And so, like Middlestat, you can work on things with him because, as you mentioned, he's an RFA, and you can sort that out. But Rantanen, you have to get done. He is one of your best players. He's a key member of your core. He's still a pretty young guy. He's going to be 28 in October. He's already at 925. That's the number one thing you've got to figure out is what is Rantanen's number for years and years to come. Now, when that extension kicks in, it'll be a year from now when the cap is around 93. So you'll have a bit more breathing room, and then the cap should go up even more. So you're not overly worried about it, I don't think, but you just have to know what the number is going to be. After that, Middlestat, for sure. Drouin. The one thing about Drouin is he found real happiness. He's in a good place.
Oh, great spot for him.
I got to think that there's a deal to be made there. I absolutely think that guy has been through so much, and he acquitted himself so well, and he was a valuable player for them at an important time of the year. Like, to me, as long as everyone's reasonable, that one gets done. Landeskog, I'll freely admit, I don't know. I want to see him come back, but I just know it's a real challenge. That injury is a huge comeback for him, although I want to see him do it. Nichushkin, this is one where they don't have grounds to terminate his contract. There's not much they can do right now. That to me is a conversation about, it's almost like a team player league conversation when everything calms down here. Ideally, what does the team want to do? The team wants to support him personally. I think that's clearly the way they've spoken is important to him. But also, once that gets sorted out and he's not eligible to return until November, does the team want to bring him back? And right now, the feelings are very raw, and you have to see once everybody's had some time to think, is that going to change? Is there a willingness from the star players in the organization to say, yes, we'll try this again? And I just don't think you can answer that right now. But if the answer is no, then on some level, you've got to sit there and figure out, okay, what are our other options? And, you can't just unilaterally terminate his deal, as we've seen with Evander Kane and Mike Richards. Grievances will force settlements. So I think the question I have at some point, will there be a conversation between player and organization saying we'd like to come to some kind of negotiated settlement so then everybody can move on? But everybody has to agree with that, and I don't think that's going to happen in the short term.
Do you think and this is my last question for you on Colorado, do you think they do anything or try to do anything with the goaltending? Now, Georgiev has one more year left on his deal. One more year. At 3.4 before he becomes an unrestricted free agent. He's 28 years old. Listen, full credit. After that first game against Winnipeg, he turned things around. But do you think they do anything with the goaltending? And here's the other one. Do you think they'll even have room to do anything with the goaltending?
I think with him, I think they let it play out for another year, unless some option drops on their lap. The one thing someone told me about Georgiev, he proved these playoffs, is he's not the most technically perfect goalie. Like, if you ask the goalie gurus out there how they feel about him, they'll say he makes them a little bit crazy the way he plays. But you know what he is, Jeff? He's a battler. He never loses his confidence. He believes that he is going to find a way, and he fights. And that really resonates with players and teams. He's a fighter. Everybody was piling on him, and after that first game against Winnipeg, and he played great, and you heard the way they talked about him at the end of that series, about how happy they were for him. I thought in round 2, he really battled. Like, that round 2 series with Dallas was amazing. Like, there were times where Colorado just pounded Dallas, and there were other times where Dallas just pounded Colorado. And Ottinger and Georgiev, I thought, were both great. Georgiev really battled. I mean, the only time he didn't really battle was on the contact, and he got the call. But for the most part, I really thought he battled. And I think that resonated with that team, and that's why I think they probably go with this for another year.
Okay. Again, don't forget Game 7 tonight, Vancouver Canucks hosting the Colorado Avalanche. Elliotte, before we bid everyone good day, I want to share something with you. So, bid everyone adieu. I want to share with you a DM that I got from our good friend Willie Donick, play-by-play voice of the Nashville Predators, who is a very, as we've seen before, very high thinker of hockey. Okay. So he sends me this note after the last podcast, and he says, following up to the thought line question on, quote, can you challenge offside on a penalty shot? We had a lot of fun with that one. That scenario, Willie DMs me, actually happened in a Preds game at Dallas this year on January 6th. Mason Marchment was awarded a penalty shot in the second period. He didn't score a Lankinen save. Nashville ended up winning 4-3. Unbeknownst to us at the time, the Preds video coaches had assessed that Marchment was offside before he drew the penalty, which was on Luke Schenn. But as you guys pointed out on the pod, you can only challenge offside for a goal. So there was nothing they could do. The hockey ops guys told us about this several days later. We had no idea. I wonder how many times that has happened behind the scenes. I'm willing to bet, Elliotte, it's happened more than a few.
Very good. Thank you, Willie.
Willie's the best. Please send us more things, Willie, that make us sound like we're smart. In the meantime, again, don't forget, tonight it is Game 7. Man, this is going to be fantastic. It is the Oilers facing off against the hometown Vancouver Canucks. The game begins at 9 o'clock Eastern. One team goes on to face off against the Dallas Stars starting Thursday. The other team goes home And we'll talk about what's next for that squad on the next podcast. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday.